So, folks, what we're going to do tonight, Danny and I are going to sort of have a little bit of a back and forth conversation. And as a reminder, we've got the chat function ability. I'm going to we'll save some time at the end to answer as many questions as we can. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to use that chat function at the bottom of the screen, send me a note, and we'll try to answer those as we go, as we end the presentation. And I've got a little presentation here, some slides and whatnot, and some videos that we'll show that'll sort of help reinforce what we're working on here with this new Eco Grande container. So before we get into talking specifically about the Eco Grande, Danny, I want you to talk a little bit about your passion for sustainability, why you started your company, how you got into it, and just sort of your history of what you've been doing here.
Yeah, I think it's a good understanding of where I came from and with the family and relationships to where we are now and why it's even more important for me as a person. But I'm a third generation manufacturer. Both my grandparents and parents were in manufacturing. So I was destined to make things. I didn't realize I was being brainwashed at such an early age at breakfast, lunch, and dinners that I was going to be making things stateside. In the manufacturing world, I became the local president of a chapter of Society of Plastics, SPE, and I heard about all these bizarre new plant-based plastics coming up. But at the same time, I had a 3-year-old son named Colton who came home from preschool one day and asked me why we didn't recycle. And I looked at him and I'm like, I don't know why. I don't have an answer, but we'll start next week. So it's kind of all these things kind of happen at the same time. So some people think like I just grew up with granola and was planting gardens when I was, a toddler. It wasn't. I wasn't raised to be that sustainable. I wasn't that familiar with sustainability. But once a 3-year-old asked their father why we don't recycle, and I didn't have a good answer, I said I need to do better. And that's kind of transitioned how we do product development. But we're a third generation. I'm a third generation manufacturer, but Vista Tech is a second generation business, family business. We do things from medical devices. We do things from telecommunications. We do things that with recycled materials, post-consumer recycled materials, plant-based materials. We do a variety of things here. Everything that we make is in Stillwater, Minnesota, which is the oldest established city in the great state of Minnesota. Right on the border of Wisconsin and Minnesota is where our office is at, our facility is.
It's funny. I've got 2 young boys myself, as you know, and it's amazing when that younger generation asks you a question like that, and that's happened to me also in my household here. It does stop you in your tracks, and it makes you think about, as 2 middle-aged guys like you and I are, really what that future is. And that's why I've been so passionate about this project internally for Proven Winners. And obviously it's completely fueled everything that you've been doing at your company. So maybe talk a little bit about this. This is sort of an interesting project that you also work on at your company.
Right. So when I was president of the local chapter for Society of Plastics Engineering, I heard about all these really bad plant-based plastics that were being developed and how bad they were. They weren't very clear. They didn't handle heat deflection very well. They were brittle, and they broke down too fast. And I'm sitting in the back of this conference, listening to this, and I'm well, do we need stuff to last forever? What would be a good purpose? Why did a small company named Cargill develop this material? And what could we develop? So I bought my first 50-pound bag of material, brought it back to the shop, and started experimenting with it. And what I try to do is think of what does need to be here forever, what's single use, and what can go back to composting, what can go back to the planet. And so I thought of food service. Obviously, food service is a great vessel to bring more organics back to composting. And I like to have a beverage, since it's Fireside Chat happy hour. So, but we do produce products like stadium cups, Selmas wine glasses, champagne flutes, small boutique plates. And when I think about sustainability, when I developed this product, if you want to be sustainable or have a land-free catering venue, you had to really sacrifice on the color and quality of the products. If you wanted, you got 3 choices of really sexy colors of white, off-white, and bone color. So we wouldn't had 11 colors certified to be compostable or industrial compostable. So when you had a party, you didn't feel like you're sacrificing. And so we kind of almost over-engineer our products so you don't feel like you have to treat it differently compared to traditional plastics.
Well, and I think that's a perfect lead into when we really do start talking about this new Eco Plus Grande plant container. What I've loved about our partnership, Danny, is you do think through all of those over engineering things, and you don't cut corners, and you are trying to find something that is both going to work for the consumer, but then also be friendly to the planet. And so maybe let's talk a little bit about that, Danny, because in the media, as I'm sure anybody who's on this chat right now hears talk all the time about plastic going into the oceans. There's been famous pictures of straws in turtles' noses, and even back when I was a kid, when you had the 6-pack of Coke or Pepsi in the plastic rings, to cut those rings up so that they didn't hurt marine life and whatnot. So this has been around for a long time, and it's getting to be a bigger and bigger deal all the time. So maybe let's talk a little bit about what you've learned as you've built your company and why it's so important to the world and the consumers on this call.
Well, and as Dave, you and I have talked so many times, there's no silver bullet. And so when you define being more sustainable or being green or greener, what does that really mean? And so what we did is we just try to say, what are social and environmental issues that people can kind of, rally around? And we're not trying to make any political statement. We're not trying to be divisive, but you look at the common need for people, from clean water, less reliability on oil, the landfill capacity, and the crop yield is something unique just because of what we developed in our own product. But if we talk about some of these issues, we're not here saying just this stop on a dime. We're saying let's just slowly transition with these things. We can make some better decisions. We talked about the age of our kids. Over half the world's population is under the age of 25. So that's a strong voice of people. The entire world, half of us are under age 25. Now, obviously, you and I are not under that age. But our kids have already gone to school, elementary school, junior highs, have already recycled, already composted, already separated for pig farms. They bring a water bottle to reuse. They don't use single-use plastics. That's not a trend that's going to quit when they turn 18. So this is the norm. And so when we can introduce something that doesn't really change your behavior or lifestyle or even your practice, but you can help make cleaner water or avoid landfill capacity or avoid drilling for oil. I'm the first one. I make medical devices. There are specific products that save people's lives that need to be made from petroleum plastics. We need to have petroleum for some of those applications, aerospace technology, engineering grade materials. But why are we using that for a garden pot, spoon, fork, stuff like that? So we're trying to be wise and trying to be balanced in our look at sustainability.
That's perfect. And, a big issue that, again, it's been in the media a lot is the world of recycling and recycling, that whole channel. And this even better than I do, Danny. We from the 80s, we started getting those little numbers on our plastic things and throwing things into the blue bin that goes out and it gets taken away from your house. And for many years you thought, and I thought, I was super guilty of this, all that plastic I put into that blue bin at the garbage truck came and got at the end of my driveway every Monday, that was all getting ground up and getting reused, and away we go. And, a lot of that plastic, frankly, was being bought by other countries and shipped overseas. And then all of a sudden, in the last probably 10 years or so, China, as one big example, they stopped taking that recycled material. And so now all that's staying in the United States, and where that is really ending up, the vast majority of it is into landfills. So we can show these graphics here, Danny, and you can talk to sort of the change in the landfill system in the United States.
We have 4 slides that represent 100 years of landfill capacity. Here's what the landfill capacity looked like in 1913, basically irrelevant. And it grows to 1938. You go to from there 1963, 1988, and the last slide is 2013. So it's 100 years of where we're putting our plastic, where we're putting our trash. What it shows, we've done an amazing job of taking our trash from our front yard and putting somebody else's backyard. And there's a problem that you see in this grid. We're starting to run out of other people's backyards. And when you look up, trash capacity in Chicago, we look up, landfill capacity in New York, New Yorkers are shipping from some of their cities, their landfill, from all the way down to South Carolina, all the way to Ohio. So you want to talk about being green by using fuel to ship across state lines, not very good. And you look at this grid here, we're running out of rural areas, so it's even costs more to get things to those areas. So we need to really look at this landfill capacity. And I like the landfill capacity issue because this is really non-divisive. This doesn't mean left wing, right wing, global warming, climate change. This is saying we got to do something better with our trash. We're putting things in our trash that we shouldn't be putting in our trash. And we're also, there's countries like Israel who is going back and mining their landfills because there's plastics and metals and stuff and organics in there that they can take out and repurpose or compost or recycle. And so the landfill problem with that is when it doesn't happen in the landfill, it ends up turning into microplastics. There's microplastics. I'm not one to sell based on fear. So these slides might look kind of like Debbie Downer, but it gets better. I promise it gets better. But these are the realities of what we all deal with. The first plastics, the petroleum plastics were first invented in like the 1860s, 1870s. Imagine the first plastic that was ever invented in the 1800s is still with us today. What happens is it breaks down to be smaller and smaller petroleum plastics called microplastics. Well, they say, well, it's just one person. One person is using utensils today for their lunch, for their breakfast. But we've been documented 100 million utensils are used every day in North America. 100 million utensils used every day. Very few of us bring our silverware in the lunch and bring it back home and wash it and rinse it off there. What happens is that microplastics gets into the fish and the birds that we consume. There's this thing between California and Hawaii called the garbage patch. This is a trash pile. Pile is an understatement, but it's the size of the state of Texas or the size of the country of France of plastics and garbage outside between California and Hawaii. They have documentation of plastics from the 70s in there, and it's just continued to break down smaller and smaller from there. So, Dave, you're from Chicago. I'm in Minnesota. Like, well, my stuff's not going there. I'm in the Midwest. Well, Then they find out that there's microplastics in the Great Lakes. There's 12 breweries that pull their water to make their beer from the Great Lakes. All 12 of them found microplastics in their filtered beer cans and bottles. So this is like, it's not just a West Coast problem or a East Coast problem or an Asia problem. This is in our backyard. And so what really got me is in June 2022, just as a year ago, in Antarctica, the BBC reported that all of their test sites, they found microplastics in freshly fallen snow. So you take this image here of this beautiful young girl in the lower right, and also now she's literally tying to plastics, microplastics falling in that snow. There's no manufacturing. There's no recycle center in Antarctica. That is literally, it's up in the dust, in the airstream, and it's getting around the world. And that's where we got to do better. That's not based on volcanoes. That's not based on cows that are farting. This is us with microplastics. We can control that.
And again, I know you said it earlier, we're not trying to be gloom and doom or anything. No. It's just sort of the state of the world, and there's a lot of plastic out there. And so, my goal at Proven Winners when I first met Danny, and it's funny, Danny, I think you and I I reached out to you as you were a stranger. I just cold emailed your company, and it was almost 4 years ago to the day. And you that day said, "Hey, I'm online, or not online. I'm doing video work on the media for Earth Day, right?" And it just so happened to be Earth Day that we struck up this first conversation.
Right.
4 years later, we've come a long way, which we'll share today. But it's my whole concept behind this, and the concept at Proven Winners was, what small steps can we start taking just to reduce our reliance on single-use plastic? And that's really all that it is. We know there's still plastic around. We still have our plastic plant containers for sure. But this new product that we'll talk more about in a second really is just sort of that first step. So we'll come back to this circular economy slide later. I've got it in the presentation. I think it'll be better to talk a little bit more about that there. But again, going back to when we first met, Danny, I reached out to you because I also saw this product. You had your drinkware that we showed earlier. I also saw this product called the Self Eco Garden. And, maybe speak to the group here of how you got interested in the gardening world and what you saw as an opportunity for this first product that you made.
Yeah, we just thought that the garden pots, again, were something that didn't need to be here for 1,000 years. And so when we looked at developing that, I asked some local growers here why they don't use peat moss, or why they don't use coconut hair, or why don't they use rice hull pots, some of these other items. And either the pots broke down too fast, or they didn't break down fast enough. There was root wrap. And I just kept thinking, boy, everybody tried it. So the growers were interested in something more sustainable, but the product wasn't good enough for what they needed for the application. So when I heard about the root wrap, I heard about really the pot breaking down too fast, not fast enough. I said, well, let's go put a mechanical spin on this. So we went and designed and patented the peel tab feature. So when you plant the entire pot, you immediately get root to soil contact. And that for us didn't realize how big of a deal that was. But when you prevent or have less stress on a plant, when you continue to have the right height of the pot going in when you're planting that, and it just an easier application for your planting that many plants, we saw some great results. And that's what kind of got you guys excited, because you could control now when the roots got exposed to the soil, and the importance of when you actually wanted to start breaking down.
Exactly. And that's what got me really excited, was I'd never seen anything like this before. Like you said, there had been a number of stops and starts with eco-friendly packaging in my career in the horticulture industry. But this idea of being able to take the bottom off and exposing those roots right to the new soil that it will go into was revolutionary, and that really led us to working together, because this is what we saw as we set out to say, how can we develop a eco-friendly type of container. This had been tried for many years. And so the picture on the left there, some of the options that had been out break down really, really fast. They break down so fast that they get mold all over them in a garden center setting. And we at Proven Winners just didn't feel that, a moldy container like that was going to be very friendly to the shopper. So it didn't hold up to our standards of how our brand or our product line would look in a retail environment. The one in the middle, again, another great eco-friendly peat-based container that breaks down really quickly and the roots grow right out of it. The problem with that situation was they needed a plastic wrap to go around the container to have care information or their brand identity on that container. So again, part of the way there, not all the way there. Our industry has tried rice hull containers in the past. Again, super eco-friendly. A lot of that material had to be shipped long distances from Asia. The other big problem with that is it didn't break down fast enough for the consumer. They just lasted forever. So there were, pros and cons to all of this, and we trialed a lot of different options like this over the years, but just couldn't find that opportunity or that product that checked all of the boxes that we felt were needed to get Proven Winners plants through the chain. And what that means is, so Proven Winners, we're a marketing company. We work with breeders all around the world to find and develop new plants and products. We then sell, our core business is selling a baby plant to an independent grower. That grower then grows it on, sells it to a garden center. The garden center sells it to all of us as consumers. So what we have to be cognizant of is finding something and developing products that are going to work for the grower and be, very easy for them to get through their production systems, for something that's going to look great on that retail bench and hold up and not get moldy or not fall apart too early. Also allow for a good upscale look and marketing type of message that's important to us. And then lastly, something that really truly is going to work for the consumer, because that's how we've built our brand, is consumer success. And so when we set out working with Danny, is we said we have to check all of these boxes, and we've completely done that with the Eco Plus Grande container. And as you can see, the picture on the left there, that is production from a very, very, very large grower this spring, product that's going to go into the marketplace. They were able to take this Eco Grande container and fit it right into the same growing and carrying trays that get transported to the garden center. It worked perfectly. It's the exact same size as our existing plastic container. So it goes into their pot filling where the soil comes in, those pot filling machines into the trays. The plants grew. We trialed and tested it for a long time to make sure that the plants are going to grow just as well for the grower as they would in a plain traditional generic or plastic container. And then obviously get to retail and go from there. So we worked hard to say, how can we make this container that's going to work for all aspects throughout the product channel, and then most importantly, work for the consumer. So Danny, let's talk a little bit about what this Eco Grande container is made of. What's the base material in this?
Right. But just to take one step back, DK, you're giving me PTSD for all these boxes we had to check. I mean, because of the brand loyalty and the image of what Proven Winners has out there, you guys could not take an inferior product. And so it really held us to a standard which made us better. So when we brought this to Proven Winners, we gave them several options of materials because we want to make sure it worked for their environment. If it doesn't work in their environment, it would never get to the home gardener. And so this base material is a starchy plant. We use corn, being in Minnesota or being in the United States. That's the most heavily available starchy plant at this point. And so we use the roots, the stalks. We use just a fraction and partial of the kernel. But these are we're not taking anything from the food source from there. This is grown in the Midwest. Most stuff comes in the 5-7 states in the Midwest. But then what we've done, because plain PLA, which is made from corn, doesn't break down that fast by itself. What we've done then to help it break down faster, we've added nutrients. And by saying nutrients, we don't say fertilizer. Those are more NPKs, but nutrients are byproducts from the other agriculture industry. For instance, if you make whiskey, or if you make ethanol, you get distillers grades, DDGs. That would be an example of something that would be from the agriculture byproduct. And so what we've done, we've taken those, but what we use is really high in proteins and amino acids, which is just really good, just good substance for the plants. The more that I've been in this industry, I'm a manufacturer first, gardener second, but what I've been told from the growers and stuff is the plants take the nutrients that they need. They don't just take until they burn out, but we make sure we're not bringing hot, nutrients into these things. So that helps it break down. It helps it. You think about it, when you plant your traditional plant, you take your plant out of the petroleum pot, you put it in the ground, and then you use granular fertilizer. That granular fertilizer then runs off in the waterways due to rain and wind. Well, now the whole pot's in the ground, and when it breaks down, it's breaking down at the root source. So those roots continue just to feed as they want it, as they need it. It doesn't run off in the waterways. And I think you have a slide showing some of the benefits of that in the ground later in the presentation.
I do. So let's unpack a little bit of that, because you just talked about a lot of things there, Danny. So let's first go back to when you talked about what the base product of the container is starchy renewable sources. And specifically, what I think is so cool about this is, here we're in this beautiful green industry. We're selling plants, right? And now we're using plants to make the container, the vessel that the plant goes into. And
Amen.
What I love about this is that we're supporting farmers, which I think is, the backbone of this country. But the other cool thing that you talked about is we're using the stuff that normally doesn't get used, right? So maybe talk a little bit about like those stalks and the root stalks, why that's so important.
Right. It's because of the starchy material, and to get the PLA, you need all those materials to break down to get the polylactic acid, which is really the base sugars of these plants. And so you start off with a corn kernel, and you get a big stalk. Well, you get to use all of that instead of just, we tried with sugar beets and tried with grasses and switch grasses. There's just not an abundance of that around at this time. But we're always experimenting with new materials and new base, more like feedstock materials. And this is the best one to bring the cost down at this point.
So the biggest question here, this slide says petroleum free. So there's no plastic in this container at all, correct?
No, so this is a plant-based plastic. Because of the standard that Proven Winners has with their label and their identification, that label is also a plant-based label. Well, we can't produce a pot with a plant-based label and then put a toxic ink on that. So the inks are also non-toxic inks going through that. And we talk about that a little bit. We talk about how do we get certified for industrial compostable, but this whole package has gone through testing and certification to show that this is an earth-friendly product.
And when you say label, let me just be really clear here. So in this photo that's up right now of Super Tunia Vista bubblegum, we have that white plant identification label. So currently that is still plastic, and I'll talk a little bit more later. We're working on that. But when Danny talks about the label, it's the graphics on the container itself. So Danny, maybe speak to that sort of how that gets worked onto the container and what makes that unique also.
Right. This is actually pretty interesting that we're one of the first companies in the world that are actually putting a plant-based label into the injection molding machine while we injection mold the pot into that. So there's the label and pot are being fused together where you can't scratch it off. And so this is something that no one in the world's doing. We're using high-end automation and innovation, and just for a garden pot, but this is what it takes to be competitive, what it takes to bring a consistent product to market. But this is something that the material comes from here, but we get the labels in a different country because there's other countries that are more proactive on the search for greener. And so the labels are with it are not made in the United States.
So what's great about this from Proven Winners, our standpoint, is it allows us to get our name on this container. It allows us to also tell the story of how to use it. And so you'll see it's probably a little bit hard to see there, but you can pull the tabs and we tell that story right onto the container itself. So Danny, let's talk, maybe this goes a little bit to what you were talking about. Somebody to explain exactly how this whole circular economy works in your opinion.
Right. I think what we're seeing now because of microplastics and because of people recycling or not recycling or the availability to compost, people are starting to look at when they buy a product, they're also looking at how they're going to dispose of it. Before, you just buy a bunch of stuff, you get a bunch of stuff. When you unpackage a Barbie doll, you get a stack of corrugation and plastic and zip ties and stuff, and you throw it in the landfill. Well, we're being more mindful of that, and packaging is a big part of that. And so when people are buying things, they're saying, okay, what do I do with this? I know, Dave, you have a beautiful front yard with how you have the opportunity to plant a lot of Proven Winners product, and you have pictures of you with stacks of hundreds of plastic pots.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, it's kind of fun to see how many plants you planted, but at the same time, you have this guilt about how much petroleum we went through. And so this circular economy, this pot fits where you can either plant it right in the ground, or you can not plant it in the ground and take the plant out and put that in the ground, or after the growing season, take the pot out and put it for industrial composting. And compost, it shows that it just completely makes the circle. You can either go back, and when you make compost, that goes back to the farmland to make more plants, or you can put in the ground, that's where it came from. So we're just trying to find ways to upcycle, to close that loop, to have the circular economy, so we don't have the burden for the next generations of what they're going to do with our trash.
So talk a little bit about this slide shows the words ASTM D6400. So yeah. Talk a little bit about what that stands for and what it means and why that's important.
Right. So the ASTM D6400 is an international or a national international standard for how something's supposed to break down. It's documented by fragments, documented by timeline, documented from what percentage is left. And so that's a standard that we can uphold to. And so we took that very serious with Proven Winners to make sure we had documentation to say, if you decide not to plant this pot in the ground, that's the first intention. But if you decide not to do that and not into your color pot, not into your planter, not in your garden, but you want to put it to avoid the landfill, you know that this has been tested to break down between 30 to 90 days in an industrial compost facility. Now, these compost facilities have giant windrows of organics. And what they do, they blend the bioplastics with grass and pineapple cores and watermelon from all kinds of things. And what they do is they get those windrows up to about 160 degrees for 5 to 6 days, and that heat and moisture in those windrows really activates these plant-based polymers, plant-based plastics to start breaking down. Now, the difference between when our plant-based plastic breaks down to microplastics, it gets small enough where microbes consume them. It could consume them. It goes back to an inert product, back to the planet. Where when petroleum plastic gets broke down smaller, it stays smaller and gets in the fish and birds that we eat. And so this is where it's different, where you need the heat and you need the moisture to really activate that. So when we plant these pots in the ground in your garden, your garden in the earth soil, there's not as much heat as it would be if you composted them with heat and moisture. So it takes longer to break down in your garden. It's going to be there, and your video shows it's going to be there after the growing season, but you have the ability to till that up for nutrients for the next year or take it out and industrial compost it. And I understand one of the things that Dave, you and I have heard about from a lot of people, well, my community doesn't offer industrial composting. What are my choices? So A, again, plant it in the ground, or B, then if you don't have industrial composting today, you can then throw it in the landfill. But we still didn't drill for oil for that to happen. And just because you don't have industrial composting today doesn't mean you can't get that next week, next month, or next year. These cities are starting to look at how can we become greener in our own backyard. And so we talk about landfills. What comes with landfills is landfill gas. The landfill gas is coming from people putting organics such as fruits, vegetables, potting soil stuff into the landfill, which creates the gas. And so this is our way to avoid those type of items ending up in the landfill and trying to compost them. So more communities are starting to be receptive to saying we should look at industrial composting. So just because you may not have it now doesn't mean you shouldn't at least support this product for future when you get in the habit of doing that.
And the reason we were able to get this certification, speak to when a Proven Winners Eco Grande container goes to the industrial composting facility, how quickly does that product break down and go away?
Yeah, for our certification, it broke down well underneath the 90 days. You're supposed to max out 90 days, but what they do is when you send your product in and they keep pulling it out to check it, keep checking it. So this product will break down between 30 and 90 days. We saw a lot of stuff almost gone at 45 to 50 days. But again, that's in that environment from there. But it's rest assured that our composters in Minnesota, they love this product because it helps bring other organics to them to create more compost. And I'll say this, compost is one of the most underrated things that can benefit us for the future. We have aggressively farmed our U.S. soil for over 150 years. And by doing that, we've taken between 50 and 60% of the nutrients out of our topsoil. If we went back and added just a 1/4 inch of compost to that soil, that topsoil, that would bring 30 years of nutrients back to that farmland. And so here we think, well, good, let's just bring more compost. Right now, Dave, we're only composting 5% of our food waste. So 95% of our food waste is going to the landfill, which then creates more landfill gas, which then creates the more issue. So by this simple solution, by being able to compost this, if you decide you don't want to plant it in the ground right now, but you want to compost it, that then can go back to farmlands. And that brings back nutrients. So then if you have nutrients in the farmlands, then they can use less fertilizers that run from the waterways. So then you get cleaner water. So like this very simple task that you can do at home is helping a bigger goal to achieve.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think that sort of speaks to everything that we're trying to do. So again, in your opinion, because you do this all the time, for somebody listening to say, how do I know if my town or my waste hauling company offers industrial composting? Any tips there?
Yeah, so Proven Winners has a website. On the website, it has locate industrial composter, and so it has all 50 states. Unfortunately, it's using the best available resources today, but it can get better. It's not Proven Winners issue. It's just the global network of composters. And so I would check with your yard waste pickup. I would check with your compost facility, check with even your waste management company and say, do you pick up ASTMD 6400 certified industrial compost products? Do you pick these up? And then they'll have the answer for you. Because when you call to see what do you recycle, they'll say we recycle, 1, 2, or 5. They'll have information, but you really should check with your local municipalities at this point.
Yeah, perfect. So you mentioned, and we'll get to this a little bit more later, there's multiple options with this container. One, you can pull the tabs, plant it right at home, and it'll break down at home. 2, it can go to your industrial composting facility. 3, you mentioned it can go into your regular old garbage can and go into the landfill. And maybe just speak to how at least this container is better than plastic in terms of how long it will take to break down, even in a landfill setting.
Right. So even in the landfill setting, so there's some people who argue that nothing breaks down the landfill because they don't give it any oxygen. Well, let's just say that your landfill supports this, the digestion of this, and they allow oxygen in there. You will see these break down hundreds of years faster than petroleum based. And so petroleum based, people will document anywhere from 800 to 1200 years. Maybe this PLA in that environment, it might take 100, 200 years at that point. I have read just plain PLA can be 80 years by itself. So in that environment, maybe because there's less heat, less moisture, it takes longer than that. But also remember, we've added the nutrients to help it break down faster, but it's still a 500-600 year better decision that you allowed somebody to do something with that 500 years.
Yeah, so 100 years versus 1,000 years or whatever those numbers are, it's still a win-win all the way around, right?
Yes.
So so now we'll get into a little bit more of really the nuts and bolts of this and how it works for the consumer. So made from plants for plants, we talked about that, includes the nutrients right in the container, which we talked about, and then this ability to be able to plant or compost. So here's a quick video that I shot last summer. As I said, I live in the Chicagoland area, Zone 5B. This sort of shows how easy it is to plant this at home.
Hey, gorgeous garden followers. I'm Dave from Proven Winners. I want to show you a brand new product that we're working on. I'm planting up my garden here at home. And this is our new Eco Grande container that is starting to show up at garden centers this spring, and we hope will be at even more next year. This is a fun, brand new container that's completely made out of plant material. It's got nutrients built right into the walls of the container. And the best thing about it is it can be planted directly into the ground. So I thought y'all might be interested in seeing how easy this is. We've got these 4 tabs here that pop off the container to expose the root systems. All you have to do is pop these tabs off. You'll see the roots are exposed on the bottom. You can take these tabs, throw them into your soil because, again, they've got nutrients built right in. And then, boom, this container can go right into the ground. Put the soil back around it, and you're done. The container will continue to break down over time with heat and moisture. And again, no plastic at all used in that container. Hope you enjoyed.
So pretty simple in the grand scheme of things. Danny, maybe speak to, I saw somebody post on social media that they were worried about the roots getting root bound. And I think that goes back to, you mentioned it earlier, some of the previous container options, I think has led to that perception. Any concerns with the Eco Grande with that?
No, because what we learned with our trials with other competitor products, competing products, we always had to make sure when you first put something else down there, you had to just hope and pray that everything was a good environment for the roots to get out of the current container. The point that you've already exposed 4 areas on the side and the bottom for it to get out, it immediately starts to grow and expand. So we've seen, one time we've seen somebody with root wrap is where they forgot to peel the tabs. So that's why, and we talk about this, the education is the hardest part we have. People want to be sustainable. People want to generally make a difference. And so now it's a matter of doing this in the education of make sure you peel those tabs. And we'll talk about later too, those tabs are easier in 2024.
So Danny referenced this slide earlier. As we embarked on this program 4 years ago, Danny mentioned earlier that he sent us a lot of different formulations to go through our internal testing. And we were testing for Is it going to be, are there going to be any differences for the greenhouse grower in that sort of environment? Then we held them in a retail garden center type of environment to make sure that it was going to hold up there. And then really, in my opinion, most importantly, we put that into an in-ground homeowner type of setting and watched all these different formulations grow out to see what what was going to work, what wasn't going to work. And what this slide shows, so this test was at one of our facilities up in New Hampshire, so sort of a colder environment. And I'm saying that because heat and moisture does help these break down faster, which we'll talk a little bit more about that soon. But here, what we showed, the left-hand side of the picture are 9 different formulations that Danny had given us to test. On the right-hand side of the picture, that was the control. So those are all just the same plant grown in a plastic pot. We took the plant out of the plastic pot and planted it in the ground. Those on the right were all given an extra boost of continuous release fertilizer like Osmocote or Shake and Feed, things that I'm sure you all use at home. So every single one of those 9 plots on the right were given an additional boost of fertilizer. Everything on the left, no additional fertilizer other than those nutrients that Danny talked about that are infused right into that container. And so this picture shows plants that had been in the ground for 2 months. And we ended up picking the one in the upper left-hand corner with the red circle around it, because you can see it matched up perfectly with that upper right hand, in the right-hand block, that upper corner there. You can see the exact same size of plants, same amount of flowering, really no difference at all. So that's what got me excited, is those nutrients that are feeding the roots right exactly where those roots are. We're not worried about runoff or anything like that. We were able to get the exact same consumer performance, in-ground garden performance for multiple months time period with the Eco Grande as we would with the traditional plant with extra fertilizer added to it. So, Danny, I think this was pretty enlightening for you too as we embarked on it, right?
Yeah, we've never seen a test like this that was so extensive. We've worked with other companies, do some trials with Iowa State to get our own feedback. But when you guys, this is your environment, this is how you went through the corporate growing, scenario. You plant how you did. We had no say in what you did, and this is through your environment. And to see these results, we knew which formulation we wanted, and we also gave us confidence that people have a better chance to have a good garden experience throughout the growing season if they happen to neglect their plants a little bit.
So we've talked a lot about how these break down. We talked about how they break down in that industrial composting facility. These are 2 quick videos that I just shot like 2 weeks ago, again, here at my house, of plants that were planted last May. So I typically plant the 2nd week of May. And then this video was shot the 2nd week of April. So not even 12 months. Again, in Chicago here, where we get lots of moisture, sometimes we don't have the greatest amount of heat. So I thought it was really interesting to see how quickly these had degraded in a northern environment. So I'll run this video here. I've got an in-ground setting and then a container setting that I'll shift to next.
So here you can see a few of the Eco Grande containers that I planted directly in the ground. 1, 2, 3 back there. Again, as a reminder, this is what that container started out with. So let's pull this one up and take a look at how it looks. So you can see I planted directly into the ground right there. The container is definitely starting to break down and buckle. And as I very easily squeeze, you can see how brittle the walls of that container are. And this will continue to break down into smaller pieces over time with heat and moisture. And so what I'll do is I'll just break those up. I'm going to put that back into the ground. I'm going to cover that up. Never going to know that it's there. I'll come over with mulch here in a couple minutes, and I'll never know that that container was once in the ground. Again, it's just going to continue to break down into smaller and smaller pieces over time. And again, you can just see these literally fall apart like eggshells into nothing.
So that's an in-ground setting, and here's one in a decorative container.
And now let's take a look at an Eco Grande container that I planted into an upright decorative container. So Here's one that's, again, sat out all winter, popped up out of the ground there. You can see the degradation of the container. Again, with a simple squeeze, it just immediately falls apart and turns into smaller and smaller pieces. Again, I'll just put this back into the soil, cover it up. It's going to continue to break down over time. You're never going to know that it's there. So really excited about this new Eco Grande container. We're working on additional sizes with a goal of continuing to find ways to reduce our single-use plastic. Happy gardening.
So as you can see from the earlier video, I lack a lot of muscle definition in my arms. So truly breaking these containers was really easy. I was not having to work hard to do that. Danny, I know you've shown me videos in your backyard up in Minnesota where it's even colder than it is here where I live, where you use a rototiller and it sort of explain, I mean, with that, it just completely, disappears.
Yeah, it breaks them up into extremely small pieces right away. I've gotten a little more addicted to gardening, and I went from 3 raised beds to now 7 raised beds, and this spring I'll have 9 raised beds. And so to go and break each pot up, it's a little more exertion than I want to do. So I take a rototiller and just till everything up for nutrients for the following year. And I personally always add a little more compost into the topsoil just to get everything going together. But I mean, and part of me is I still see little triangles of that plant-based plastic that might rise to the top in the garden, but I just know that something that I planted didn't end up in the landfill. I didn't have to drill for oil for it. It's kind of a reminder that I made a good decision.
And again, what we've seen in warmer climates, the degradation is even that much faster, right?
Yes, correct.
So we're continuing, as new as this product is. We had some in the marketplace last spring, more at garden centers here in spring 2023. For 2024, because we are so excited about this and we're getting great feedback from both our trade customers, but also from consumers who are excited about it, we're expanding and we're improving and we're making some modifications. So this is a new size. We'll be calling it the Eco Plus Quart. The Grande fits for a lot of our flowering annual varieties, which is a huge part of the Proven Winners program. This quart size container can be for growers who want to, have a little bit bigger size, let plants get a little bit bigger. Also opportunity to start incorporating perennials into it, which is exciting because a perennial you plant once and then it's there. And so you're not even going to really know that container is in the ground, and then it's just going to continue to break up and whatnot. But Danny, maybe speak to the change that we've made for the 2 tabs versus the 4 tabs.
One of the things, we Proven Winners is great at getting feedback and the voice of the customer, and people saying, the 4 peel tabs, it's nice, but it'd be nice if we could peel it faster. And where we plant a lot of pots, how can we do something better? So we went back and we found a way to have 2 peel tabs. So now more root to soil has exposure, easier to plant, faster to peel, and easier. I think it's easier to peel these 2 tabs also. So it's just, again, an improvement for what the end consumer wants. And we're really happy with this. Again, we're able to minimize some of the weight of this material with some of the new designs and even I'll say the growers have changed some of their practices from how they used to go and check root development, how they used to go and squeeze a petroleum pot. And also they changed that where instead of taking that, now they turn upside down to check some of the root development because they know that they have to make a few concessions to use these pots compared to just using general petroleum plastic.
So real quick, going back to the videos I just showed, probably the overarching message on this to y'all is the container isn't going to magically disappear.
Right.
I know you've heard this. I've heard this from people, again, because there's been so many stops and starts in eco-friendly packaging over the years. A lot of the earlier ones just never broke down at all. So I think there's this fear of, man, it's never going to break down and it's just got to be gone, right? And that isn't going to happen, right, Danny?
That's not there yet. I mean, we talked about 3 customers: the corporate grower, the retailer. Let's look at the retail shelf. Has to go through the corporate grower facility, and then the home gardener wants to break down in a week. So we can't really fit all those. And so the person that we probably gets the least amount of cater to is the home gardener, but just because we have to make sure it lasts long enough. from there. So we continue to develop new materials, and we're going to continue to push to maybe 4 years from now, we might have something that breaks down in growing season, and we might be able to cater those to the home gardener, accordingly.
One more quick point, and I've got a couple more sort of wrap up slides, and then we'll try to get to some questions here. I'm sure somebody on here is wondering, can they put the Eco Grande in their backyard composting bin? I in a very suburban setting, I've got a bin in my backyard that I'm throwing my banana peels and apples, slices and all that, fruit and vegetables that we don't get to in the refrigerator and got to go in the compost bin. Can that be done? And if so, what are expectations for people in that situation?
Yeah. So if we're going to just speak professionally about what's certified, then our garden pots are certified for industrial composting, not certified to be backyard composted. That doesn't mean you can't do that and then deal with whatever's left, as you saw from your garden, after the fact. The issue with getting certified for backyard composting is people compost differently in each of their backyards. You really need to activate that with the heat and with the moisture. And so that's why this one just passed just a general backyard compost, A, the thickness of the material, and B, not the consistency of how people compost. But if you know that you're a good composter and you are active and you make sure you keep the right amount of, variety of vegetables and coffee grounds and eggshells, and you put some of these in there, I would suggest try it, especially after the growing season. If you want to take it after the growing season, it's already had 6, 7, 8 months to break down. You'll see that. But if you do it, I would break it down ahead of time. Get as small as you can to activate that. But I can't sit here and say that's certified backyard compostable. I'd be lying to you. But I know people that do have used it in their backyard compost, and have tilled it up and stuff and had very good luck, but we're not certified for that to make that claim.
Yeah, and I did that at home myself. In as we were testing this in the early years, I broke some up, threw it into my bin, and then let that go throughout the summer and the winter, and then next spring for my raised vegetable garden beds, which is where I typically use that compost. I just threw it into that bin, worked it into the bed, worked it into the soil, and I didn't even know it was there. So it is an option. Okay, great. Last couple of things. I'm sure there's some questions from people here saying, where can I get this? What garden centers have that? So we had a few million of these go into the retail marketplace here for spring 2023. So depending on where you are in North America, some may already be in your stores. Some may be coming here as the weather warms up. So the biggest thing I would say to you is first, go to your local garden center and say, hey, I'm interested in this new Eco Grande container from Proven Winners, or will you carry this? And I think the more that consumers can talk to their local stores about this, the more opportunities it's going to be to getting into the marketplace. But there is a way that if you want to check directly in your local town or neighborhood, if a garden center has that. So this is our homepage at provenwinners.com at our main website. Up in the very, very top, you'll see a Find a Retailer. And if you click on that button where the red circle is, up will pop this page, and down on the bottom where the red circle is, you can either click the My Location button, and that'll hone right into your computer's IP address. It knows right where you are, or you can specify a location, type in a zip code, hit that apply button, and then up will come a list of retailers close to you. This is one example of one of those websites, Harvey's Farm and Garden Center in Massachusetts. On the right where the arrow is, it shows all the different Proven Winners products that they carry, our annuals, perennials, our shrubs, our houseplants. And then they are also carrying the Proven Winners Eco Plus container. So it'll show right on that local garden center, if they've checked that they'll have it. So that could be a good resource for you. Again, you can always call your local store. Another product we didn't really touch on today, but I want to also share is we do also have a seed starting Eco Plus container. So again, this is back to the Proven Winners homepage up there where I've circled in red in shop. If you click on that, you have an opportunity to be able to buy some seed starting pots. So Danny, maybe speak to this. You created these a number of years ago also, right?
Yeah, these are people that want to do it themselves, that think they can do it better, and they have a passion for it. And this gives you a nice chance to start something that will be ready to plant in the ground when you're ready to have a plant in the ground. Sometimes when people have tried these starter packs, it breaks on too fast on their windowsill or under the lamp, or not fast enough, or they have to transplant into something else. And this is just a nice 2-inch square that allows you to start something on your windowsill, on your ledge, under grow lights. And when you're ready to, you peel 4 tabs on this again, plant in the ground, and gives you a nice start for a great planting.
So again, if you anybody out there starting vegetable seeds and whatnot, we do have these available through the Proven Winners online store. Once you click on that shop button, it'll take you to this page and those seed starter pods, and you can actually buy seeds on the website also, but the little seed starter pots are available there. Again, I know we've talked a lot of stuff today. If you have more interested in learning more about this, again, on that Proven Winners homepage at provenwinners.com, at the very top in that search bar, you can type in Eco Plus, or I think you can even just type in Eco, and that will take you to a frequently asked questions page. And there's a wealth of information on this. There's a video, which again will show you how to use it, how to pull the tabs off, how it'll work, what we did and whatnot. So you can either use that search function or that URL that's on the page right now, provenwinners.com/eco_grande will take you directly to this frequently asked questions page. And so that's sort of the crux of what we're here to talk about tonight with Eco Plus Grande. I do want to thank all of you for gardening with Proven Winners, for taking time out to talk to us today, and most importantly for being excited about this. So Danny, real quick question. I want to end here at 7:00 so everybody can enjoy their evening. This question was, how frequently do we fertilize with the new pot? So Danny, maybe speak to what those sort of nutrients are. I know you don't want to talk about the actual secret sauce, but
right,
sort of that base level of nutrients.
Yeah, so these are, again, amino acids and proteins. So if you want to add your natural fertilizer that you normally do, you might want to try and see, you can look at your plants and see what they need. This is something where I don't feel that if you don't change anything from your previous habits, I think you'll be okay. But you might be able to look at it and wean back a little bit. But I would just look at and get a feel of what your plants look like. When I do it, I throughout the year I do add extra compost in there. I add a little bit of chicken feed to that throughout the growing season. And I use that same product. That's just me saying I just want a little extra. So I'm not saying ignore it, but just kind of just be aware of it.
Yeah, and what I do, Danny, so especially with Proven Winners annuals, which is what this Eco Plus Grande is really being used for right now. They're heavy feeders. I mean, I joke, I've got a 15-year-old son who eats a lot at that age. A lot of our plants, like our super tunias and our super bells, they love fertilizer, and it's almost impossible to over fertilize those plants. So I'm a heavy feeder when it comes to my plants at home. And the way I look at the nutrients in the Eco Plus Grande, it's that sort of that base level that it's going to help, right? And it'll give you something. But to really get the beautiful results that you'll see on our website or in our gardener's idea books, or that you'll see in your neighbor's yards, these plants will always benefit from more fertilizer. So you're not going to over fertilize them if you add more continuous release fertilizer like the Osmocote, the Shake and Feed, or we have Proven Winners branded continuous release fertilizer. That, to me, what I always tell people is that is sort of like your insurance fertilizer. It's your insurance feed. We know inherently a lot of people they forget to fertilize, or they just don't fertilize, or they'll do it once and then they go 3 or 4 weeks. That continuous release fertilizer is that it'll always give you a little bit of nutrients throughout the growing season and sort of act as your insurance policy. The other great thing that it does is it also releases with heat and moisture. So lots of times, where I live here in Chicago, we plant in May, you get all excited about gardening and you fertilize right away at the beginning. And then all of a sudden you go on vacation or things get busy with, parties or the kids or whatever. And then you sort of forget to fertilize. Well, as it gets later into the summer, that's where that slow release fertilizer really starts to go, right? So I use that as my base level. It's there. Then I also add water soluble fertilizer, and you can do that weekly. You can do that bi-weekly. You can do it once a month, whatever. all of that will help really get your plant. So the overriding message is you can stay on your same fertilizer schedule. It's not going to hurt it. It's not going to burn it, the nutrients that are in that Eco Grande at all.
It's a nice safety net.
Perfect. Well, it's 7:00 here. I'm going to let everybody go. People either want to have dinner, have a cocktail. It's also the NFL draft. So if anybody's interested in that, we'll let everybody go. Danny, I do want to thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for your partnership. Thanks for inventing this really fantastic new product. To all of you gardeners that are on here today, thanks for taking the time to join us. Thanks for gardening with Proven Winners. Reach out to us, send us an email, go through our website, info@provenwinners. We will answer that email within 24 hours. That's a policy that we have. So whether it's about this container or anything related to Proven Winners or anything related to your garden, send us an email and we'll get you an answer quickly. So have a wonderful spring season. And thanks again. We'll talk to you soon.